And this is Scaling Clean, the podcast for clean economy CEOs, investors, and the people who advise them. I'm your host, Melissa Baldwin. Each show, we bring you usable insights from tested leaders that you can apply to the business of running your business. This is a special episode for Scaling Clean. We've had repeat guests on the show before, but we've never had a joint interview. I'm pleased to have two incredible CEOs joining me today. Dan Shugar is the CEO of Nextracker, the leading global solar tracking company for 10 years running. Nextracker IPO'd in 2023, and in the last year, they've announced new products and technology, expanding the company's platform beyond solar trackers. Nick Cohen is the CEO of Doral Renewables, a developer with 17 gigawatts of projects across 22 states. Doral is the renewable energy developer behind America's biggest solar project, Mammoth. There's a reason why it's called that, and I'll let my guests tell you more. Doral uses what they call a farmer-friendly approach to energy development, and we'll be talking more about that in the show as well. We brought the two of them on the show to lead a conversation around supply chain, domestic manufacturing. Nick and Dan, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. So first, I want to just get started by the two of you working together. You're both CEOs at large, well-respected companies. How did you two first meet? Is there a story there?
Well, we have friends that are that brought us together, and the reason I think that people identified us as not only having a good business outlook working together, but also personalities and philosophies is that Dan values relationships, and his own people, the people he's worked with in the past, and his customers. And, that is our core value as well, and my personal philosophy in life. So, I think we were a match meant to be.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Nick. And I have to tell you, well, I have told you this, but I'll share it with the folks listening to this podcast. You gave us the opportunity to participate in your groundbreaking and then ceremony for commercial operation of your huge Mammoth project in Indiana. And I've never seen that level of proactive engagement with the community. It was very moving and wonderful to participate in that, and also really exemplified the kind of company you are and inspired us. And I'm appreciative to be supporting you and your great EPC partners on that particular project. Communities are understandably sensitive when solar projects come into their areas because they're concerned that their way of life continues to be extended and built upon, that there's value for the communities. And what you've done really on the ground there in Indiana, where you had so much participation of the farming community, the rural development community, both at the local and the state level, really became a win-win-win for Doral, for your landowners, and for your partners like your EPCs and Nextracker. So thank you for that, and the opportunity to get to know you better in this process.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It was easy working with you because you are very grounded in reality with the people on the ground, and your technology makes our projects better. But even better yet, and Melissa, your audience might be interested in knowing this, and you probably have some questions later on. Dan and his business has connected us with incredible manufacturing in the Midwest. We have more steel in our project than the Empire State Building has. And, Dan's company is out there procuring that steel and using, Indiana workforce and Indiana manufacturers and other Midwestern manufacturers to produce it. So when you think of like sunshine and butterflies and solar, there's a lot more to it. There's steel and jobs and manufacturing. It's an entire industry cluster.
You got right at one of my questions, which I wanted to hear more about the supply chain. But before we go there, can you tell us quickly, for our listeners who don't know, why is Mammoth called Mammoth?
Well, you would think that what a great name for the biggest project in America. But I'll tell you what, it started out with one farmer in a field who told me that, oh, in the next field they found a woolly mammoth. And that farmer said you should name it Mammoth. And little did I know, every farmer we talked to said, yes, I want to be in this project. And then it literally became a Mammoth project. So yeah, and some of the farmers were at the Smithsonian in Washington, and they sent us a picture. There they were, standing next to the actual mammoth from the field, and there it said Pulaski County, Indiana, and it's sitting in the Smithsonian.
No
So
way. The
yes,
bones from those fields are in the Smithsonian?
yeah, as a fully assembled mammoth, which from what I understand is kind of rare. And there it is standing there, and that's what we're named after, the actual mammoth, and everybody can go to Washington and see it if they want to.
Nice. Well, my next question is on supply chain. You started to get at that a little bit, Nick, but I want to hear what you've done with supply chain in Indiana with Mammoth. And specifically, I want to hear the term circular economy has been thrown around, but I want to hear, what does that mean in your words, Nick?
When you're talking about the amount of steel that Dan's company brought in and other resources, I think he's the right guy to kick this question off.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, let me share the backstory for how this came to be. So we've been the number one tracker and structure company for the last 10 years globally, and the number one company in the United States. Up until about 5 years ago, our customers were just very focused on what's the lowest delivered cost of product, okay? And typically most of that was coming from overseas. What happened during the initial part of the pandemic was global supply chains really melted down. Things changed greatly. For example, there used to be, you could count on global logistics to be able to bring a container from point A to point B pretty much anywhere in the world for $2,500 to $3,000, and do so, with good delivery time. That changed during the pandemic. We had steel price doubled in a little over a quarter, and logistics price tripled. Moreover, the lead time to get goods from place A to place B extended massively. Lead times went from a month to 2-3 months, and sometimes were indeterminate at the time. We saw a variety of factors drive this. Also, a lot of natural disasters. We had wars, issues with the Panama Canal, issues with the Suez Canal, and so forth. So we just said, at this point of our career and the growth of the company, we are not going to go forward like this. We're going to, in major markets like the United States, massively build out supply chain. And we've done the same thing in other markets like India. This is before the Build Back Better and the IRA legislation came to pass. So we basically have completed dozens of factories across the United States to fabricate our tracker parts. And we partnered with 3 out of the 4 biggest steel mills in the US to actually go mill direct with the US Steel. And for example, Indiana, as Nick has mentioned, that state alone produces about 25% of the total US steel made in the United States. So it was a perfect place to really lean in. And so in that region, we worked heavily with the major mills to source local steel and then fabricate it locally, deliver it to the job site. A lot of benefits came along with this. Yes, the US steel is more expensive. However, you saved a lot of money with logistics, saved a lot of time. We're able to support the EPCs with on-time delivery of parts. Also, we didn't appreciate how much cleaner the US steel was than the overseas steel. The US steel is an order of magnitude less carbon dioxide per ton of steel produced at the original mill. And we were able to put tracker fabrication physically on the campus of the major mills or nearby. So when you put all that together, it resulted in a much more efficient delivery process an affordable process that was predictable, supported the build schedule, supported the EPC, and at the end also delivered a much cleaner U.S. steel product.
And then to complete the circle, firstly, the power is being sold to Indiana utilities and companies who are using it to benefit people in the Midwest. Also, every single day, we have 1,200 people, local people out there working at high wage, putting this project together. And so that it's an incredible economic opportunity for the local economy. And then the final thing that you might not think about, but it rings so true, is that we are bringing sustained like food practices back to the farms, the small farms. There was a time in America where small farms cultivated food. Today, the small farms are struggling, and a lot of them are quagmired in soybeans and corn, which is a very difficult commodity product, especially if you don't have a large scale. We have agrivoltaics introduced into all of our projects, and what that means is that the farmers get to cultivate food, whether it's grazing or crops, in and around the solar farm. As you can imagine, when you look at a solar farm, there's more green than there is glass. There's a lot of space between the rows, around the rows, there's margins, there's inside the fence, outside the fence. And as a vegetation management practices philosophy, you can deploy vegetation management. And instead of just mowing the grass and paying for that, we can actually pay the farmers to cultivate food. And then they can be more competitive with their food because they're getting the vegetation management payments from us that we otherwise would be giving to lawn mowing. So it's that's talk about a full circle economy. We're back to the way that people remember when their farms had food, thanks to the solar project.
I'm curious, Nick, what kind of food can be grown on and around the solar projects?
We've had a lot of success with sheep and pork. We have about 3,000 sheep grazing right now, and our herd is moving towards 9,000 by maybe the end of next year. We have hundreds of pigs. They're called cooney pigs, and they're free grazing. They're a little different than your normal pig because they don't root, which is important because you want the grass to grow back. We had a barbecue recently with all the elected officials and a couple hundred local people, and everything at the barbecue was grown in and around the solar field. We had popcorn, and we had different vegetables and all kinds of meat, pork and sheep or lamb, and we had local restaurants prepare it. And this is something that it's new and it's exciting, and communities can really relate to it, and that's part of that whole relationship aspect that I was talking about earlier, where we really need to connect with the farmers, and we don't want to fake it. It has to be real. You can't just go and shake their hand and smile and tell them they're great and then see them 6 months later or a year later. You need to do something. And in this case, we're changing lives, and we're trying to reclaim the character of the community through our solar projects, and it's working.
Yeah, and just to pile on what Nick was saying, Melissa, the one nice thing is that any income that's generated to the farmers from this activity, which is essentially dual use, as Nick mentioned, it's essentially doing vegetation management of the solar field while nourishing livestock and ranching in this application. Those income streams are decoupled from the commodity volatility that those farmers are normally subject to if they're just growing and then selling into the market. So it's a nice dual income stream there for the community, and it's just amazing to be part of that. And really, just taking a broader view. So Nextracker is a global company. We're partnering with Doral in the Middle East. We're working with other companies in Europe and Latin America, and the flexibility of the solar is that, you can put it close to the ground, you can put it above the ground, you can space it, fairly close together, you can move it far apart. So you can sort of tailor the solar to whatever they're already doing on the site. For example, if they're growing cotton on the site, there's over 90 million acres of cotton being cultivated in the United States now. Okay, you could have the solar trackers further apart. If they want to graze more disruptive animals like cattle, well, you could raise the panels above the ground and so forth. So there's a lot of flexibility for how to configure the systems. And what we've been doing is working with Doral on this Mammoth project, but also with the Doral engineers to really tune in agrivoltaics how the panels follow the sun and co-optimize both for energy production as well as crop generation in other markets.
I want to ask a follow-up question to Nick. And when you were talking about the project, you mentioned 1,200 people have jobs. Can you tell me what kinds of jobs are you creating with these projects?
Sure. The types of jobs that the 1,200 people are doing are typical construction jobs. There's a lot of digging. There is a lot of electrical work. These are advanced operator type jobs. Right now, it's a unionized job, and so there are a lot of what I would say like skilled work taking place. There's also an apprenticeship program, so it's giving the opportunity for a lot of young people to learn the trade, and that's definitely something that we think will not only benefit them, but as we build more projects, and believe me, there are plenty more projects coming, we're going to need those people to work on our projects.
Mm. And I want to ask one more follow-up question too. Dan, you mentioned that you're working with Doral in the US, but also in the Middle East. I'm curious, how are you working together to make those projects different based on the different soil or economy? Like like any specific examples of how a project in the US and Indiana might be different than one of the other ones you're working on?
Yeah, so some of the international projects we're working with Doral on, there's things like small avocado trees and things like that. So we're working on like massively elevated solar trackers and that are optimizing the angle for both energy production as well as the light that's actually on crops that are coming down. And so there's really a tremendous amount of flexibility in the operation of these systems, and you need to bring, agri-science into the algorithms that are used to control the solar panels and how much light falls on the crops versus what's falling on the panels, and using things like infrared monitoring to measure the temperature of the crops and things like that. So we're still learning. It's early days in agrivoltaics. And what I'm so excited about is with leaders like Doral, this whole topic's been framed as sort of a, solar versus agricultural land. And we see it as agricultural land and solar together help each other out, where 1 + 1 equals much more than 2, because again, the solar, you can configure it so that only, say, a quarter of the land is covered by solar panels, but even there you can be growing right under the panels to an extent, and that they're helping each other out because you have this dual income stream for the agricultural community. You have a lower cost or a more efficient way to do vegetation management. And then when you're cultivating crops and other livestock, the system has less dust. There's less dust on the solar panels. You can integrate irrigation where you're for both cleaning the panels as well as irrigating the crops and keeping the field cooler, which benefits the electricity production. So it's still early days. What we've done is we're working with Doral on the applications for their projects. We also have a bunch of controlled test facilities at Nextracker. We have one in Silicon Valley in the US. We have one in Brazil, where we have a team of people and we're actually measuring crop yield and things like that. So it's early days, and we really think this is a great win-win to bring value to owners of solar power plants as well as to rural communities across the world.
Dan gave away some of our secret sauce, which is there's a lot of investment going on between our companies on science and R&D, which I think is giving us a more effective and predictable outcome. And so it's really exciting stuff. Also, Melissa, you asked me about the 1,200 jobs, and I just have to tell you about a couple of my favorite jobs. Believe it or not, there's quite a bit of AI going on right now. And so we have AI operators, I would call them, and drone operators whose job it is to control inputs, and often they're from drones, but there's other things as well, that monitor everything that's going on. And, for example, if one post is put in 2 inches off center of where it should be, we can detect it. And we have people who actually operate the AI to detect these things. And when you can imagine something like hundreds of thousands of steel piles going into the ground, you don't want to be off. And the old way of doing it was, just people walking around with, I guess, tape measures. And then it evolved to GPS units. And today you actually have drones in the sky measuring and observing and doing all these things. And there are people who are experts in operating the drones and the software. Also, another job, robot operator. Okay. We have an army of robots, our contractor who's building it. And those robots do different things. Last time I was out there were robots that were going and measuring exactly where the hundreds of thousands of piles go. And they look like little R2-D2s. I mean, it looks like an R2-D2, maybe a little smaller. And they're on tracks, and there's like armies of them out there, and they have little flags, and they just do their job, and they put the little flags in. And then there's human operators that go with special machines that put the piles in. But the next thing will be AI pile drivers.
My son is in 8th grade robotics, and he didn't like his teacher at first, but I literally told him on one of the first days, I said, look, son, I work with companies who do this. So there's really a future in it.
We have school groups out there all the time, and it's a wonderful school trip. You can focus on science and math and all sorts of different subject matters, and the kids can get out there and get their hands on it and really see, how something on a piece of paper that doesn't seem important in the classroom actually matters, out in the field. And I know we're making a lot of scientists, girls and boys, scientists in Indiana right now because of the project Mammoth that we're talking about. And we're doing this same thing in other places like Ohio. And I just know every class that goes there, we turn somebody into a scientist.
That's great. And I want to point to another thing I heard you say. You talked about how you're investing in agri-science and agri-PV. I have to tell you, at TigerCom, we've done research looking in rural communities and measuring opinions. And one of the things, because as you know, it's getting harder and harder to build. And we tested a variety of messages. And while there's no magic words that we can use, we found that what moved the needle the most was when you helped people understand that you can have dual use, that you can have both farming and solar together, that one doesn't necessarily replace the other. So that it's really smart, I think, for both of you to be demonstrating new ways to be able to have farmers continue to farm the land while they get this additional source of revenue. So we talked about the value of dual use. I wonder, what do you think about policymakers in that region? Like, if you could create a 30-second commercial for local lawmakers, regional, state level, county level, what would you tell them? What do you want them to know about what you're doing?
First thing I would say is that they're doing a great job because our elected officials, all the way from the governor down to the local officials, have been incredibly supportive. It's a pro-business working environment, and they're promoting anybody who wants to invest in rural communities in Indiana. So they're doing a great job. I would remind them that we're using Midwestern steel, and we're providing electrons to people who live in their constituency base, and we're seizing on Indiana's, or the Midwest for that matter, competitive advantage. That this is one of the biggest competitive advantages that has come to rural America in decades, and it's not going to be here forever. And either everyone's going to be buying their power, or they're going to be importing power from farmers in other states. So I would say do everything you can to assure the success of all forms of energy coming to your state and investing, because this is the new industrial revolution, with data centers and the electrification of the economy. Don't miss out. This is your one shot to bring prosperity to rural America, and outcompete your neighboring states.
Yeah, and I would build on that, Melissa. Nick's comments is that the United States has really become a manufacturing powerhouse for clean energy. Nick has brought up the incredible work we and some of our collegial companies have done, really using steel made in the U.S. for our tracker parts, and sourcing hundreds of thousands of tons of steel a year mill direct in the U.S. But the same thing is true for other components like solar panels. The largest supplier of panels in the U.S. is a U.S. company that makes panels in 3 different factories. Today, there's over 30 factories making solar panels in the U.S. at scale that are delivering to projects. And so it's become a tremendous source not only of construction jobs, but ongoing manufacturing jobs throughout the value chain. And additionally, what's been really exciting is how battery systems have become very cost effective. Companies like Tesla and others are making these batteries that go on this either on the sites with the solar plants, or they become part of the grid. And what that allows the solar to do is make power during the day, but continue providing firm power through evening, after people go to bed at 10 or 11 o'clock. And by then the need for power drops dramatically. So this is helping keep the lights on. Power demand in the U.S. is growing strongly for the first time since the 1950s and 60s. And solar power is by far the most cost-effective way to meet that growing demand. And so this allows customers to have access to locally produced energy. And let's not forget that commercial solar technology was invented in the United States in the 1950s by Bell Labs. And what we've done at Nextracker and other companies our industry has done is really bring the solar manufacturing job story back home.
Yeah, Melissa, 2 other points. We have a million panels coming from Texas, and it's a foreign company, not Chinese, that has a huge factory. They invested in Texas, and they're producing massive quantities of panels for our projects in the Midwest. And then also the other thing that I would want a legislator to just be aware of is that there is a movement right now attacking landowner rights across America. Local zoning authorities in many cases are telling landowners what they can and cannot do with their land. Can you imagine owning a farm and being told that you can't harvest the sun and have sheep on your farm? That's what's happening. And so legislators should really be thinking about how can they protect their constituents' landowner rights. And I'll tell you, it's a slippery slope. Once you tell someone they can't have a private business transaction on their property with a solar, the next thing they're going to be telling you is that you cannot have a barn because it's ugly, or you can't have a gun range because it's noisy. Suddenly you just get into this slippery slope, which we're starting to see, that these zoning boards get emboldened very quickly, and it is becoming an impediment to progress in America, and it is attacking landowner rights. And so we need to protect those landowners.
An attack on private property rights. Yeah, we absolutely are seeing that. And I want to ask, actually, along that line, given that we've seen this pushback, when we think about the industry at large, and this is a question to both of you, what advice would you give to other developers who want to build in communities, given that we have this increased pushback?
My advice is when you have to know where your strengths are, be committed to it. And as a developer, you're either somebody who like buys projects, okay, and which means somebody else kind of did all the groundwork, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's what your strategy is, or you're someone who creates them from scratch. And if you're someone who creates them from scratch, then you need to be able to own those relationships on the ground for real. You cannot go and put on a suit or send people in to make land deals and buddy up with farmers who aren't genuinely in there to listen and work with them and be their friends. It's got to be real. And so if you can't do that, don't even try. Farmers are business people. They're really smart. Communities, they will detect it, and it'll make your development work a lot more difficult. You're better off buying someone else's project. So that's my advice is if you're going to go meet the farmers, really get the sheep dung on your shoes and really get to know them and be sincere, and only send people who are sincere, and those people should go all the way to the top. Okay, your CEO, your finance people who are in the office, they need to go out there and get their shoes dirty for real.
Nick, you're reminding me of something you said when you were on Scaling Clean the first time, episode 20. You talked about how people should be able to go from the barns to the boardroom. So
That's right.
I have to compliment you for having message discipline there. You're very consistent in that. And I think it's a great point, right? You have to have somebody who's comfortable having that conversation on the ground with the farmers, and also knows how to run the business.
Yeah, and believe me when I tell you it's you need to make sure that somebody is everybody in your organization, because it's very easy to hire the smartest guy you can find to do something in an office that you need, okay? But he's not the right guy or woman. They're not the right person if they cannot go out there and sincerely have a good time connecting with the farmers.
Well, you're touching on something. I want to give Dan a chance to answer the first question, which is what advice would you give to other developers? But I'd also love to hear your thoughts, Dan, if you would share just Nick has been on the show before. We talk about the business of running your business. And Dan, you have grown and scaled Nextracker tremendously. Over the last several years, the company has really, you've gone through an IPO, you've gone through a lot of growth. So if I could give you a two-part question, one, what advice would you give to other developers? And then two, what advice would you give to other business owners in this space who are looking to grow and to build a company that will thrive?
Sure. So on the first part, do like Doral did, and I don't say that because I'm on this program with Doral, but what they did was they engaged with the community early and often, and they really created a multiple win environment. Everybody that touched the project was, it was beneficial to them, and it was done in the right kind of way, meaning that the local folks that were involved in their business got to be engaged in the project at each phase and in an ongoing way. So that was a great. Also, just the way the project's laid out, you don't want to build around people by buying adjacent properties and things like that. You want to develop responsibly, build responsibly, and work with high quality products. What we've really done is also focus on how our product's delivered to minimize the amount of trucks, how it's installed to minimize the amount of construction equipment and things like that, and have the minimum amount of packaging on the site that has to be dealt with, those types of things. In terms of building a great company, easy to say, but hard to do is build like a great culture. So you can focus on the right things for your mission and your vision. But then having a culture that's focused on the right things, what we're really focused on at Nextracker is innovation that delivers value for customers and projects. We're focused on customers, really listening, understanding their needs. We're focused on execution, meaning to ensure that every engagement we touch, whether it's a supplier, an employee, a vendor, a end customer, a government agency, that every engagement that we do, we meet or exceed our expectations. And then we're focused on also our internal team. I'm proud that 6 of my 6 co-founders from 13 years ago are still with the company. So we try to do the right thing and have the right intent. And that's allowed us to have, grow to number 1 in our space in a year, over the last 10 years. And, basically we've delivered over 130 gigawatts of material. That's equivalent to the peak load of Texas or double the peak load of California. So what a company I founded for a few $1 million a dozen years ago has done is delivered enough material to support 2 Californias or 1 Texas in the middle of their peak summer day. So it shows that it's really the power of ideas that allows you to, and then great people and the right intent and culture that allows you to accomplish seemingly impossible things. I really think there's a tremendous opportunity. I believe solar will be the number 1 source of energy generation in the world within this decade. In the United States, the Energy Information Administration basically shares that view, and so does the International Energy Administration. So, solar is the greatest way to generate power because there's no moving parts, there's no fuel, it uses a very small amount of natural materials, and it's fully recyclable.
If anybody's studying company culture academically, they should be looking at Nextracker and Dan's company. It's validated his culture with the creativity and the excellence, because as you can imagine, when you have $2 billion under construction, which we have right now, the problems that you face are endless and complex, and it's only his company that steps up every single time and solves the problem. It's like amazing. We're impressed every single time. I don't even have to call Dan when the problems are escalating. His people are just, they're there. They have this sense of urgency, a fire in their belly, and they come with ideas, and they're great team workers, and the solutions are amazing.
That's very gracious, Nick. I really appreciate it. We have a saying at Nextracker: I don't care if it's my problem, your problem, or someone else's problem. How can we be helpful in solving whatever the issue is? And by sort of focusing on that rather than the contract, that's helped us, engender, to make sure customers are successful, and then engender that confidence to move forward on additional, support them on future work.
I have, if I could, one final question. You can keep it really short. We like to ask everyone this. Do you think that success hinges on what a company chooses to do or not to do? And I'm asking Dan because Nick's already had a chance to answer this question.
I think both. Sometimes the best project or program you do are the ones that you say no to. And so we're very discerning in that. And, but then, we've taken on things that are really hard. You have to go into everything you do, in my view, with the philosophy, we'll be okay if whatever we're considering doesn't happen. So you have to lose any sense of desperation or something. I don't need the next project. What I need is another great partner. I don't need to chase a shiny object in technology. What I need is we focus on problems that need solutions rather than solutions in search of problems. And with that type of mindset, you end up doing the right things and avoiding the things that are cul-de-sacs where you're not adding a lot of value.
I love that mindset, Dan. That's great. Okay, with that concludes all my questions. You both have a chance if you want to say any final parting words for our listeners.
I mean, I'd like to say that when you think about solar, think about how it's an incredible business proposition for communities all across America, and it's driving the AI revolution. When you think about data centers, what do data centers need to exist? Power. They have to go through us, and so it's really important that if you're a legislator or you're a listener, that you're out advocating for solar and battery storage and other forms of energy. That you're doing everything you can to make sure that America is competitive and that the people really have the opportunity to take advantage of this once in a lifetime opportunity. And by the way, once you put a solar field in the ground, you can't pick it up and move it to Mexico or somewhere else. It's actually classified as a manufacturer, and it's there producing electrons and revenue for the community for the next 35 years. And then when it's finished, we pull it out, and guess what? You have fertile farmland there, and the families can take the farm over again, and it's a wonderful win for everybody.
Thank you, Nick. Any final words from you, Dan?
It's great to work with customers like Doral and Nick Cohen that are doing the right things for the right reason and doing them in partnership with communities. What we've tried to do is develop technology that helps those types of projects and programs be really successful while we've been building out our U.S. and overseas manufacturing facilities to serve the overseas markets. So we're at the beginning of a really Solar 3.0, an incredible revolution. It's wonderful that we've seen the whole U.S. supply chain get built out from trackers like we're doing at Nextracker through solar panels. And I think our best days are in front of us. So thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this webcast. And we look forward to more great projects together, Nick.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Scaling Clean, the podcast for clean economies, CEOs, investors, and the people who advise them. I'm your host, Melissa Baldwin. Our producer is Claire Quirin. If you like what you hear on Scaling Clean episodes, we'd appreciate it if you'd give us a 5-star rating and leave a comment where you get your podcast. And until next time, we wish you all the best in the clean economy transition.